ADCC West Coast Trials was truly an amalgamation of the best parts of jiu-jitsu competition. There were over 700 registrants, which means hundreds of fascinating different storylines on day one alone. If you just want to see submissions, Flow Grappling already posted 70 unique submissions in these two videos right here, so you can go ahead and watch those. But what I want to focus on are some specific stories throughout the weekend, because where else do you have the elite of the elite in a sport competing with the general public with stakes so big that they have international implications? Professionals that have been around the block in all of the biggest events in the world can have their weekend cut short by a kind of random brown belt. And that's exactly what happened to Andy Varela, who ran into Daniel Dieter on day 2. If I'm being honest, this match would be getting zero attention if it weren't for the controversy, because it was just boring. Pretty much nothing happens throughout the entire regulation and most of overtime until Andy nearly secures a back take off of a wrestling scramble. So naturally, it brought Andy to complete shock when he didn't get his hand raised. And he was furious after the match when he finally made a comment saying, "This guy's an absolute snake. Trains at the gym of the guy I went against and reffed my match. LOL. I'm a chin check you soon." And he's pointing his anger at Jacob Norton, who reffed the match and cross trains at Kingsway, where Daniel Dieter trains full time, pointing to a conflict of interest. I've watched the match a couple times now, and it was really close to me, but I'd actually side with Varela based on more initiation both in regulation and in overtime. It was extremely close though, and the judges felt that Dieter had done a bit more to get the action started, even though he didn't capitalize with any real positional dominance. You can't deny though that the match was very close, and you also can't deny that Norton reffed the match just fine. Comment section of Andy's comments are mixed, but certainly have a lot of people coming to Norton's defense saying, "The ref has nothing to do with the judge's decision unless it's a big dispute between the judges. Why is he threatening the ref?" I judge for ADCC. I had Dieter. The only big moment was Andy nearly getting the back take. The issue is it was off Dieter's initiation. Also, refs aren't judging the matches, and even if a teammate was judging at trials, there are 2 judges per table. Although some believe Norton had nothing to do with the outcome of the match, others still think that the teammates should not be allowed to ref their own, which it seems Jacob Norton continued to do throughout the weekend with some training partners from 10th Planet ATX and at Kingsway. Whatever you believe, both of these guys are capable of a lot more than what they showed in this match and had otherwise solid weekends. But this controversy is only the tip of the iceberg at ADCC West Coast Trials, so let's delve into it, starting with the good. The standouts, of course, were the winners of each division: Gianni Grippo, Michael Sainz, Nathan Haddad, Elder Cruz, Nick Hartman. And for the women, Sarah Galvao, Shyla Lindsay, and Paige Boris. Michael Sainz may have had the performance of the weekend, with truly devastating submissions leading all the way up to the finals. He was breaking arms and legs non-stop and just walking off the mat with the cheekiest look on his face. If that rubs you the wrong way, I encourage you to watch the latest Flow Grappling show where he was interviewed, and I think he comes off so well. The sport really needs more personalities like Michael Sainz, who isn't dull or shy. He talks a bit of trash, but he's not coming from a bad or inauthentic place.
Every day I heard about that loss. Mostly my mom. She's like, you're my favorite second place son ever.
He just seems like a guy that grew up in a very competitive family of fighters and knows how to dish it and take it in a funny way while also being an unbelievably gifted grappler. He still seems a bit undersized for 77 to me, but he's got crazy endurance and competes so much that I think he'll kill it at Worlds or whatever comes next. Gianni Grippo finally won ADCC Trials. 4 words you thought you'd never hear at this point. I honestly think he may have competed in close to 10 Trials events and usually ends up on the podium, but he's never won until this past weekend. He didn't have a point scored against him, took a lot of backs, and put his signature squeeze on pretty much everybody. Plus, the way he did it in the final must have just felt so sweet, with really a comeback submission finish over a really dangerous opponent in Dominic Mejia, who he actually lost to by submission just last year at AIGA. In regulation, Mejia all but had his back, and Grippo just managed to avoid letting the hooks go in. So as time expired, the judges took some time to deliberate again, and after review, they decided this was not enough, so it went to overtime, where Grippo really turned it on. He almost had an anaconda choke early on, but eventually had to let it go. And as he was passing, Mejia almost secured the same knee bar position that he finished Gianni with the last time they competed. It must have been a split second of nightmare deja vu, but this time it was Gianni's get back, as he passed to the back and skipped jiu-jitsu rule number 1, position over submission, just throwing on the choke with no hooks at all. He managed to get his legs involved, even though this wasn't necessarily a scoring position, but it was all he needed to get the finish. Now, the the ADCC Worlds are not new for Gianni, as he's been invited back in 2015 and in 2019. I think it's safe to say though that he's got more experience than any active competitor in the 66 kg division, if not at ADCC in its entirety, having competed on every big stage out there. So he'll once again get a shot at one of the last titles he still hasn't won, but this time having earned his spot legitimately through a trials victory that's going to bring him a lot more confidence and momentum on his side. Sarah Galvao also stepped into ADCC trials even though she probably didn't even have to. She's competed against a lot of the athletes that have already punched their tickets or been invited, and really has beaten a lot of them. But as a rookie black belt that's so young, it doesn't hurt to get more experience in no-gi, especially since she's also very active in the gi, and she looked incredible as always. Just a clinical back take with a powerful hip bump pass that she seems to do to pretty much everybody before she got the choke in the final, and winning with a submission just makes things so much more memorable. And the most feel-good moment of the whole tournament is Nick Hartman, who punched his ticket to Poland, completely avoiding overtime by submitting or scoring on all of his opponents in regulation. And in the final, he had the super heavy panna, dealing all his weight into a crossface as the points kicked in. And flat on his back, he still explosively scooped him overhead to end up on his legs and snatch up a nasty ankle lock for the gold medal tap. And what makes this one even more special was the tribute he made in his post-match interview.
6 years ago, I had my daughter. That was the greatest day of my life, the day that she was born. I worked so hard to get to this point because I wanted to use this as a platform. A year after my daughter was born, she lost her vision, she lost her hearing. It was my goal to get here. I get in front of a bunch of people and tell them I want to find out where the doctors are, where the hospitals are that can help my daughter. The publicity is what I needed. And I'm hoping that someone out there that can see this right now. Sweetest little girl in the world. I just want to live her. I want her to live as close to a normal life as possible. And this is for her. It's for Jackie.
And after all that good, it's time for the bad. Okay, I'm calling this the bad, but it's really not bad. It's just that not everyone can win gold, so these stories are more unfortunate because these people won't be moving on to the final in September. But that doesn't mean that these aren't exciting stories that were super interesting to follow all weekend. Michael Liera Jr. is a name that might sound familiar to you like it did for me. And when I saw the name pop up on mat number 1 with some slick passing, taking his opponent's back and finishing him super quick, it took a few minutes for me to pinpoint way back in the depths of my mind that I've seen him before. Many times actually. It's been a while, but Liera was a staple in primarily the gi world back when I first got started in jiu-jitsu. And he's always been an absolute beast. He holds wins over guys like Renato Canuto, Jonathan Alves, Johnny Tama, Jackson Nagai, Manuel Hibamar, Tommy Langacker, Giancarlo Bodoni, and the list just goes on. In truth though, the last few years have been really quiet for Liera, and I don't know where he's been, but he certainly hasn't stopped training. And with his experience competing with some of the best in the sport over the last decade, and the Ruotolos in his corner, he was able to put on a masterclass here at trials. And he really didn't have an easy road, as he hit an arm drag back take before finishing JJ Bowers with a rear naked choke, and it looked like he was rinse repeating the same back take strategy on Chris Olivo, except he couldn't remove his hooks and reinsert them to score, so he actually had to wrestle and win in overtime. At the end of day 1, the close guard game was really on full display, as he was making Richie Lewis panic in defending back takes, triangles, and inversions to K guard. But in overtime, Liera faced the most danger he had seen all day, when Lewis had taken him down and was looking to plant either his butt or back on the mat. This is the only way to score points, but Liera battled, managing to stay on his shoulder and invert to initiate control of his own, preventing the points and allowing him to play from his guard again. And from here, Liera's opponent probably didn't have the rules down pat, thinking he had won and stalling it out. But in reality, Liera had a flawless strategy. On day 2, he'd taken out one of the biggest names in the whole bracket, Alan Sanchez, with a rolling back take in the first minute that he was able to hold for 5 full minutes, scoring the hooks when points came on. Now he'd advanced to the semis and ended up taking his only loss of the weekend in a close matchup with Max Hansen, the eventual silver medalist. This one went to overtime, and it was Max who gamed the system perfectly to end up on the bottom of a shot and staving off Liera's passing to get the eventual razor-thin decision. A disappointing result that can really feel so defeating because even with all that success, it wasn't enough. Liera didn't let that stop him though, coming back out in the bronze medal match where the stakes were literally 0. 0. He had the same killer instinct that he had for the entirety of the tournament though, snatching up a triangle and bringing home some hardware. The most stacked division is always debatable, but a lot of chatter would suggest that it was under 88 kilos, with previous trials winners like Ryan Aitken and Jacob Couch. Plus, no one really expected Nathan Haddad to look so good and win how he did, dominating Aitken in the final. But who I want to focus on from under 88 is the tragic case of Jayden Groner. He was coming off his breakout moment from the PGF that ended a couple weekends ago, where he showed his ability to get on people's legs and finish them fast, winning the MVP award for the whole season. And he continued doing this through his first 3 matches at West Coast Trials, finishing all 3 with ankle locks in almost exactly a minute. And when he ran into fellow PGF vet Nathan Haddad, things were continuing to go perfectly, and he was making Haddad retreat with attacks, eventually exposing his back and going up 6-0 body triangle on. It was looking like he could be continuing the sub streak until Haddad popped right out of the back control and onto his feet. Even though this match was all but done, he didn't tone the pressure down a single notch and continued pouring on the passing. With under 30 seconds left, Groner just had to hang on, but Haddad jumped on a Kimura and extended it to an armbar for a buzzer beater tap with 1 second left. And again, this is not all bad for Groner. He proved that he can dominate and compete with anybody in this division. But to be on the losing side of what people are calling probably the best match of the entire weekend, that's gotta hurt. And he'd still finish with the bronze, scoring another 1-minute ankle lock submission over Sean Yadamarco to close the weekend. And for my money, the second best match of the tournament also happened in the 88 kilogram division with Liam Crelinsten versus Callan O'Mahony, who had scored a beautiful takedown for 2 points and nearly passed him out on the younger Crelinsten brother. And even though it was later in the match, Crelinsten fought his ass off to escape, showing some real heart and ending up on a tight waist near the boundary. I thought it was over with Callan cruising to victory, but Liam took the lead off a back take and even scored again with a sweep ending up on top. A triangle came back at him, but he avoided it and would end up on bottom with Callan nearly passing right at the buzzer. This was an awesome back and forth match where Crelinsten really had a gutsy performance. He'd go on to win another one, making it to day 2, but lost in the round of 16 for the less than ideal result. But all is not bad for Liam, who also announced that he'll be competing on the next UFC BJJ card against Max Livingston. I don't know if he earned his shot with the UFC based off of this performance alone, but I'm sure it had something to do with it, and that's pretty cool. Also, it's funny to me that his brother was just calling out the UFC to have him fight for their belt, so maybe that's also brewing with a double Crelinsten card.
UFC BJJ, hit me up, I'm coming for that belt!
Finally, it's time for the ugly of West Coast Trials, and we're talking slams. Now, ADCC is pretty unique in the fact that they're one of the only rule sets that allows slams to escape submissions. Recently, there was a change so that slams are only allowed at the championships and trial events, not at opens, which is smart for liability because it usually results in a pretty bad injury. But they're still allowed at trials, and don't forget trials are also an open event, where anybody can sign up to compete even if they're not adequately prepared or expecting to get slammed. And even worse, anybody can sign up who might just be a twisted person looking to slam somebody. Thankfully, this year we didn't see any bad submission escape slams, but I did see this guy get supposedly knocked out off of a takedown. But it really just looks like an accident in my opinion, so hopefully he's okay. But there's really only one bad story I want to focus on, and it's Julian Espinoza, who is a real favorite here at 77 kilos. He started off strong with a submission win and a win on points, but it was his third match against Richie Lewis pretty early on where Julian was spiked onto his head in a really scary way. Thankfully, it turns out he was completely okay despite how bad it looked, and he actually doesn't blame his opponent for this move or think it was done on purpose, even though some others claim that it was blatant. However, where this gets really ugly is that Espinoza claims that after the slam he was 100% fine, and ADCC told him it's fine to not move since they're gonna disqualify the guy and to go get it checked, and then he was told he was the one getting disqualified since it was not a slam or spike. He says, "I could have continued fighting if they wouldn't have told me they were gonna disqualify him." If that's true, it was pretty poorly handled by ADCC officials. William Tackett also shared his thoughts, saying, "From my POV, it looked like you tucked as he slammed. I saw it as an unintentional spike. Since you were in a neck brace and got carried off the mat, they awarded him the winner, I think. I do think these calls need to be made quicker, not 10 to 20 minutes after the fact, but you can't lay there motionless if you want to continue." What an event. There's honestly so many more stories I could go into. Like Singlet guy who hit that crazy guillotine. Like, what's his story? But I think I'm gonna leave it there for now. And to palate cleanse before this video ends, let's talk about RAF. Looking back on the April 18th card, where the big story was Arman Sarukian versus Uriah Faber because Cejudo versus Merab fell through. Unsurprisingly, Arman looked bigger, stronger, faster, and overall more technical as a wrestler. He's just naturally bigger and a lot younger, so that's what we were expecting when he tech falled him. But then it made absolutely no sense seconds when he was deep on a double leg and drove Uriah off the mat with no chance at defending himself, landing over the commentator's desk and onto the concrete. Just an unbelievably scummy move where he could have hurt a legend of the game who's been retired for a really long time at this point. But Uriah was okay and able to continue the match and had this to say about the whole situation.
Yeah, I was on the concrete. My back was actually hurt going into that. Like the 2 weeks before I did my first match. And I'm saying, come on, man. You got to resort to this, buddy? Yeah, well, I don't think that was personal. I think that was him being a clickbait. He's like the National Enquirer as a human being. He's trying to get these clicks and at all risks. You know, these young guys will do anything for the clicks. And he wanted to risk both of our livelihood. He knew what he was doing. He said, let's throw caution to the wind and bless his heart. I could have, got up and did an elbow shiver to the back of the head or bitched and moaned, but I know exactly what was going on. He's just trying to draw some attention to the wonderful sport of wrestling.
Uriah also shared his thoughts about the RAF pay, which by all accounts so far seems to be really good, and explains why so many big names are happy to partake and become regulars at these events.
You can make as much as a doctor or a lawyer if you have 4 or 5 matches in a year. That's never been heard of, and that's why people are going to be tuning in, and there's going to be a bigger hype, and this thing's going to have a lot of success.
And maybe the most unpredictable UFC champion is middleweight Khamzat Chimaev, who seems to be the next in line to make an RAF debut. They clearly have a great relationship with the UFC, who have loaned them so many fighters despite not having any stake in the company. It's a shame on the jiu-jitsu side though they choose to do exclusive contracts, looking to lock up UFC BJJ athletes and prevent them from taking part in outside events equivalent to RAF. Maybe UFC freestyle wrestling is coming down the road. The Tackett brothers made a sponsored post revealing that UFC BJJ will be incorporating drug testing at the end of the year. Not many other details have been revealed, but assuming that all athletes have to pass a drug screening to compete, the roster will probably start to shrink. And you can definitely expect that Roosevelt Souza will not be a part of it, as he just had his no-gi world championship from last year stripped, on top of a 3-year suspension from the IBJJF after testing positive for mildronate, a drug that improves cardiovascular function or endurance. But worse for the UFC is the potential loss of Renato Canuto, who's also dirty after it was reported that he tested positive for modafinil by the commission involved in the MMA promotion Tough Enough, where he competed back in March. This drug is known for its ability to increase alertness, sharpen focus, and reduce fatigue, and although he claims it was from a tainted supplement that he believed was safe, and he didn't take it on the day that he was competing, the promotion will still be issuing a suspension, and I doubt it will bode well for his future with the UFC. Brasileiros this weekend will be the next step for the 4 black belts who are still on Grand Slam watch. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in the potential next meeting of the absolute final between Sarah Galvao and Gabby Pisania. And as a reminder, they're 1-1 so far this year. Finally, the main character Jiu-Jitsu Invitational on the following weekend, May 3rd, just got a bit better now that 2 of the athletes are riding high as trials champions. There's lots of good stuff coming up that I didn't mention here, but I'll definitely cover in the near future, so make sure to subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.